we're switching gears a little bit right now for this segment to talk about the 4 University of Idaho students who were murdered last month. With us out in Moscow, Idaho, to bring us the latest is Law&Crime's very own Angenette Levy, the Renaissance woman of the organization. She's out there in Moscow. You're looking kind of warm, Angenette, so I'm glad to see that you're doing well. What are the updates?
Hey, good afternoon, Bob. We are here at that house on King Road where, sadly, a little more than 3 weeks ago, those 4 students were murdered. Police say that autopsies revealed that they were all stabbed to death. Some of them had defensive wounds, although we don't know which victims actually had those defensive wounds. As you can see, more than 3 weeks later, there is still crime scene tape surrounding this home. It is still a crime scene, and it is under guard 24 hours a day by some type of law enforcement agent or officer. We don't know if this is private security. We're trying to get a little bit more information on that, but they've been switching in and out. We've also seen Moscow police, just officers patrolling here along King Road, just coming by and checking things out. Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, Maddie Mogan, and Kaylee Gonsalves are the 4 students who were murdered more than 3 weeks ago on November 13th. It happened in the early morning hours, and Moscow police have been posting updates on the department's Facebook page each day. And they say they're really trying to determine the timeline for Ethan Chapin and Xana Kernodle that night. They had been at a party, we've been told, at the Sigma Chi house around 9 p.m. They returned home here to the King Road house around 1:45 a.m. on November 13th. So police say they're trying to pinpoint where they were, what they were doing, who they were interacting with in those hours as part of the investigation. They also say they've been looking into this claim that Kaylee Gonsalves had a stalker, and they've been able to determine that there was a man that she had encountered at a store or a restaurant somewhat recently before this happened, and they determined that this man and another man were there trying to meet women, and he was seen around Kaylee, but police say they've looked into that and they believe this is an isolated incident. However, they continue to look into additional information about her potentially having a stalker. So they are sifting through thousands of tips, conducting interviews as we speak, and of course there is testing going on at the crime lab. This is a crime scene, and there was a lot of evidence collected. Obviously, we don't know the results of that testing, and we won't for some time.
So, Angenette, just falling back on my experience a little bit, I have just a couple observations. Now, nobody can feel better than this like I can. You've got thousands of tips. Information management is a problem in a case like this. You have to make sure that everybody is following up on leads and that you're still continuing with the investigation. There's a lot of forensics. We're talking about defensive wounds. We're talking about an up-close and bloody murder scene. So there's a lot of scientific evidence that has to be gathered. But by the same token, what I'm seeing from a media management standpoint, not that this to me does mean something. If you're messing up the media management, are you messing up the investigation? What's striking to me is that we're getting contradictory information, whether or not this is targeted, whether or not the community should be concerned. And we're having the prosecutor speak and we're having police officers speak, which is something that should never happen. It should be one person that's the spokesperson. I get not giving data. Sometimes cases take 6 months, 8 months, and it's frustrating to the public. But what is the sense out there as to whether or not this investigation is being done properly? And of course, we know there's multiple law enforcement agencies involved.
Well, I think there is a lot of frustration, and we've seen that in some of the comments from Steve Gonsalves, who is Kaylee Gonsalves' father. He said he's been frustrated. I spoke with him briefly by phone yesterday, and he is a father who is grieving, who wants answers like the rest of us do. We've heard we've heard them say it was targeted, and then maybe it wasn't. I mean, I think we all know that a lot of times in an investigation like this, you just don't know what you've got on your hands. You have to start looking at the victims, looking at their habits, who they hung out with. It's called victimology, really going through their cell phones and their Facebook messages and their TikTok messages and whatever else to see what was going on in their lives, because it does seem like it would be unlikely that this wasn't targeted. And, you know, Bob, these are families that are grieving their loved ones. And we want to play a clip for you of Ethan Chapin's mother. She spoke recently. So let's listen to a little bit of what she had to say, and we'll talk on the other side.
Eternally grateful that we spent so much time with him. And I want to remind you that that's the most important message that we have for you and your families, is to make sure that you spend as much time as possible with those people, because time is precious and it's something you can't get back.
And I think anytime we see something like this, we know that time is precious. Ethan Chapin mourned by his family as the other victims are mourned by their families. He was a triplet, Bob. He had siblings who attended the University of Idaho with him. So this is an incredibly sad case, and police have been talking about this whole idea of, speculation that's been taking place, misinformation getting out. And they say that they're trying not to release a lot of information because they don't want to compromise the ongoing investigation and a potential of future prosecution. So we'd like to get some more answers from the police. We know in covering things like this, there are certain things that they will not release. But yes, it's been kind of interesting because we've kind of asked to talk with the prosecutor here, who made some statements that raised some eyebrows last week. We've been told he will not be available for interviews. And the police are really saying that any information that comes out should only come from them. So they're trying to maintain control over this, but it's a huge, huge investigation and people want answers.
Yeah, I find this to be, again, this is a very unhealthy environment. The prosecutor ultimately is going to be the law enforcement agency that is going to be prosecuting the case. They're the ones that are bound by the ethics rules. They are the lead agency in the end analysis. In my mind, they should be the ones giving the data, because the police may be releasing data that they're the ones, the prosecutors, who judge whether it could be harmful or not to the case. So I don't get that. I have to ask you, Angenette, based on what I'm seeing, how many murders has this police department investigated in this area? Are they competently skilled and seasoned investigators?
As far as we know, the last homicide here in Moscow happened around 2015. And I think you have to keep in mind, we've been told that Idaho State Police are assisting with this case, as is the FBI. The FBI has agents here assisting with the investigation as well. And they have people with the Behavioral Analysis Unit. That's the unit that does criminal profiling. They have 2 agents with that unit here trying to develop a profile of who would have carried out these murders. So it sounds like there are a lot of agencies involved in this investigation. Moscow would be the lead, of course. But obviously this is a big case. It's a quadruple homicide. You had 4 kids in their beds, murdered in the middle of the night. So it's a big case. There's going to be a lot of forensic evidence involved in this. So it has to be handled very carefully because if they're going to prosecute this case, they need to ensure that they can get a conviction.
Yeah, and that's why the prosecutor should be handling pretty much also the media. My only point that I got to say out there, Angenette, if we have any say over it, let them know. Sometimes law enforcement agencies, multiple agencies, don't play well in the sandbox. That is a fact. So hopefully that is not occurring here.